Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We are back for budget hearings. City Council Bill 21-0080, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. I'm Eric Costello, Councilman for the 11th District and Chair of the committee. I am joined in chambers by Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee, and Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee. Also joining us this evening is Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee, Councilman Zeke Cohen, 1st District, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District. Representing Mayor Brandon Scott is Natasha Mehew and Nina Themelis. Representing Council President Nick Mosby is Nikki Thompson and Matt Stegman. Staff to the committee is Marguerite Curran. We are also joined by City Administrator Chris Shorter, Deputy City Administrator Daniel Ramos. We are here this evening for Department of Transportation. This is the last session of the evening. Once this is completed, we will be back tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9 a.m. for the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. We have with us in chambers Director Steve Sharkey and Liam Davis, Director of Legislative Affairs. Director Sharkey, you have a presentation. Please put it up and take it away, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, as well as the rest of the City Council. Thank you for having us at this budget event. So appreciate that. Just want to thank also all the crew members of DOT over the past year and a half, how hard everybody's worked, not just day to day as well as on the budget to try to keep services. Just really proud of my team every day and the hard work that everybody puts forth. So just a little overview on the budget. Of course, it's I guess Bob Seneme's already given the overview, but I'll just say in terms of the DOT budget, we're trying our best to be as efficient as possible. And we're always looking to improve and move towards complete streets. So complete streets is the law. We passed the complete streets policy this year as well, or I guess registered it, so to speak. So it's the law, and it has regulations that are bound by law to improve the streets of Baltimore for all users, especially pedestrians, bus riders, bicyclists, to really make the streets safe. So I'm glad that not only is that encoded in law, that using that we can move forwards towards that and try to infuse everything we do with that as much as possible. So we have a huge number of budget items. It's pretty amazing. The number of budget items that we have. So I guess I'll just go through, start from the top, and we'll just go item by item. So start over with street lighting. So street lighting is the lighting of streets. We spend about $20 million a year. So to repair pedestrian lights, as well as part of that is the energy costs. And so it's not going to be a huge change this upcoming year. We'll expect a larger number than the previous year with COVID, but we're keeping the lights on. That's the main focus, of course. We have a pretty sturdy in-house staff, large number of electricians that work on these things, every day. So that's the basics of the street lighting. All right, conduits is a large division, and this is only the operating for conduits. Conduits, Baltimore City is one of very few cities in America that has its own conduit system, which runs both electrical wires as well as telecommunication wires through underground conduits in the city for connections. So the city is almost a utility in a way, and it bases off its user fees. So the user fees are what funds the conduits. The city has a conduit enterprise fund, and we're going to spend about $13 million operating on conduits, and as well as other capital, a large amount of capital money to improve the capital system. BGE is the largest user, and then about 25% of the rest of the system is used by different telecoms. So administration, DOT, is a pretty large group of folks, in considering both it's got the HR functions, the fiscal functions, the IT functions, and the contract administration functions. So DOT has a large contract administration staff because of the work that has to be done to process all the different contracts, especially the federal contracts that we work on. Street management, this is mainly what would be considered the maintenance division. So it's primarily maintenance division, has a lot of road repairs, street repairs, both large and small, sidewalk repairs, some alley work. There's more capital work that gets done that's larger. So this is a lot of the small things that get done, as well as some of the cleaning functions that we provide, the litter pickup crews that we have. Traffic management. Traffic management is, of course, the traffic division, as well as the number of engineers. This also includes the folks that replace the signals and fix the signals. So they're working 24/7. They're out there working right now. So they're the ones who go out and fix the signals. A lot of good folks over there working hard. Also to mention in terms of traffic management, when I got here, we had about 5 traffic engineers. Over the last year, we've hired 3 new traffic engineers who are versed in complete streets, and hopefully soon we'll have 2 more engineer associate 2s. So we're really trying to infuse each and everything we do with the traffic engineering to improve and focus on how do we make this intersection slower, how do we make this area safer, how do we make it better for pedestrians. So it's good that we have that start, and as we build up the staff over time, to not only have the ability and time to make those changes, but also to actually implement them over time. Special events. This is kind of a large section here that deals with, well, not large, but a busy section that deals with both special event permits, stationary sidewalks, food trucks, also setting up. Baltimore City is one of the cities that provides the most services in terms of what we provide to our special events. So we have both electrical setups, we have bike racks, we have tables. We just kind of provide a lot to the special events. This still follows over with so that it's just a lot of services that we provide, much more than many other cities. But at the same time, it's exciting to have a vibrant city with special events that can happen each year. So that's the main pieces about the special events. During the last year, they've also worked hard on COVID, frequently helping out with setting up their different bike racks and other things at community centers, as well as other large events that might have happened around the city. But they'll be back July 5th, or July 5th we'll be starting to ramp it back up. Inner Harbor Services Transportation. This is a lot of work in the Inner Harbor. Mainly the lighting is the biggest cost, as well as promenade, bulkhead work, and utility hookups, and some other fountains that we also maintain. So that's the Inner Harbor Services. Snow and ice control. This, of course, is a number, and of course we end up, depending upon how the year goes, going below or above. This year, was a lot of storms, but I'm really proud of how the team came together to set up a virtual snow room this year, so that we wouldn't get each other sick during the the height of the pandemic. So we came together, did the snow room virtually, worked out well. Really focused on having a data-driven approach and mapping approach to run down SRs, as well as to make sure that the individual folks or individual drivers, both regular and contracted, were doing their work. So I was pretty proud of that. Vehicle impounding and disposal. We have two main tow yards. 6700 Pulaski is the main tow yard. We have a small one at Fallsway, a small holding facility at Fallsway. So, any of the any towed vehicles that get towed by the city end up coming back to the tow yard, as well as we have our own tow services. So it's pretty sizable group that works hard, and they've been working hard throughout the pandemic as well. Sustainable transportation. This is primarily the Circulator, as well as the Harbor Connector. Both of those are now running at pretty much full steam. Transit's very important to this city. So Baltimore, even though it's, Baltimore is a very bus dependent city, it's a very transit dependent city. 30% of households own 0 cars. So if they want to get somewhere, they're taking the bus. So that's why we want to really not only, do our best to improve our transit services, but also to work closely with MTA on as many, improving their services, working together to make sure that their buses can get through in a timely fashion and get folks to work, which is, probably the thing that I think about most as a DOT director. Public rights-of-way landscape management is both private is both in-house crews, as well as a substantial or a large contract to maintain and clean or mow medians over the summer. So pretty large group, quite a number of medians to maintain. Bridge and culvert management. This is for maintenance of bridges. We have a large number of bridges. We've been trying to spend a little bit of extra money to improve bridges through this program. So we end up, trying to just, of course, larger capital jobs, bridge replacement, bridge repairs, but also trying to, keep the bridges up as long as we can and improve them over time. Parking enforcement, everybody's favorite. Is of course focusing on downtown enforcement of parking, as well as residential RPP enforcement. Also, people that are just parking improperly in ADA zones and other places. So it's a lot going on there, and working hand in hand with the parking authority. Just of course some changes through parking, especially in some of these business districts with the outdoor dining. That's extremely exciting. Just a lot going on in this space. Survey control is an in-house group that we have that does surveys of roads, sidewalk, and alleys before work. So there's certain types of work that we have this in-house crew that does surveys. So they do a good job, and they probably save us a fair amount of money by doing their work through in-house crews. Dockmaster, that's an interesting one. The Dockmaster was previously, if anybody remembers, the folks that would drive around on a golf cart and collect $2 an hour from the boats that were parking in front of Harbor Place. Of course, nobody's really parking in front of Harbor Place, and the money that we spent usually, or made, the money that we made usually did not cover the cost of running the cruise. So we're definitely looking to reimagine the Dockmaster last year and this year. The docking, we will not be enforcing the docking costs, although not that many people are docking on this side of the harbor, which would be quote unquote ours, or the cities that we particularly own and maintain and dock for. Definitely looking forward to something possibly with a private third party or some vendor to maintain that, because it's a specialized field, and we're just honestly not the greatest at it, and it would cost actually more money. Well, anyway, there are also some capital needs down there to make it a more exciting boat place. So, on the other parts of the Inner Harbor, the private locations have, fancy and really super cool docks that people really, really like and pay a lot of money for. So we're not quite in that space. Street cuts management. This is the inspectors that focus on street cuts. They're working, just to try to coordinate and improve street cuts, as well as to find the folks that don't repair the street cuts properly in time. So traffic safety is a little bit different than traffic. So this is primarily crossing guards, as well as the folks that physically go out and put up the signs and paint the or maintenance folks that paint the road or stripe the road. So that is what this section is for. All right, real property management. This is tied with the permit shop. So this is a lot of the permits that come through that, if you want to build in the road, if you want to if you're moving and you need the curb for the day. So this is a large number of permits that come through this, as well as developers agreements, which is when, private developers come and work in the road to, put new sewers or other utilities into the new developments. So this is quite a large amount of work that are done by, only about, I think, 35 people. And that is the main part. So thank you so much. I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you, Director. Council President?
Hey, Mr. Chair. Hey, Director Sharkey. Just really one quick question. I know that a couple years ago there was some concerns around what we were charging. I know at the beginning of your presentation you talked about the conduit system and how Baltimore City is one of not many municipalities around the country that kind of owns and maintains our conduit system. I think there was a study that was done that really compared, I guess, our pricing to the external utilities companies for usage of the conduit system, and saw that we haven't raised rates in quite some time. Did we ever rebalance that with that evaluation, or where we at with regarding that?
Director, you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Council President. So about 6 or 7 years ago, the city did raise the rates quite substantially in hopes of improving the conduit system and putting capital money into it. So we raised the rates so that we could fix the system, because the system was decaying over time because we had low rates and we weren't actually improving the system. So at the time we raised the rates. I don't have the dollar values off the top of my head. We raised the rates, and then the telecoms and other users, and us entered into a 6-year true-up agreement, which then lowered the rate to a certain amount. So we still raised the rates pretty high. I think we're at $3-something now, and now we're spending about 15 to 20, well, probably even 25 million a year on capital. There was a deal that over the 6-year period, which we're in year 5 of 6 roughly, that we would spend X amount of dollars, I think is $104 million on capital. And if we did not, we would have to give money back to BGE and the telecoms. So we're totally on track to spend the capital, improve the system, and then hopefully, continue with negotiations to show the needs and the dollar values in the system.
So the idea is once we successfully close out that agreement on our spend and maintenance, then we would do a reevaluation of where we are in comparison to where the rest of the country is for charging, market rate associated with the use of the conduits.
Yeah, we'll be doing a renegotiation with the users.
And what year is that in, Director Sharkey?
I believe we're discussing, renegotiations are going to be starting soon, but I want to say FY23 is the end date. And if Tavon is on here, he can, or Ola could say when the actual end date of the agreement is, or the 6-year period.
Yes, it's the beginning of fiscal year 23.
Thank you, Mr. Braxton. Thank you, Mr. Braxton. Director Sharkey, if you could just make sure that the council's kept up the breath on when we start to enter that phase of negotiations associated with it, I truly appreciate it.
Of course, we'll do.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Director, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I have a number of questions and I'm sure I'll hit on rounds 2, 3, and 4. I want to start with services at DOT that are currently suspended or modified as a result of COVID-19. And before you respond, I'd like to provide one caveat. Let's say towing has resumed, but there's a significant backlog. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for, whereas I'm more interested in special events are suspended. I know the mayor just made an announcement about that. So I'm looking for kind of real time what's suspended right now as a result of COVID in the agency.
So very few things are totally suspended. There's some things that are, not totally happening as much. I'll go through and look at each type and I'll mention how each are doing. So street lighting, slightly less staff. The public shouldn't see a large change. We're hoping for late June, early July to be back to 100%. Conduits, no change. DOT admin, no change. Street cut management, we are out there. I think no major changes at this time. Let's see. Traffic management, there is a slight, you won't see a large changeover in traffic signals. There's a little bit less crews working at particular times when there are many, but not a large in the quick turnover, some more of the preventative maintenance work, as well as the traffic associates. A number of them are a little bit, are working some staggered shifts, hoping for those to be fully up in June and July. The traffic associates review stop sign requests as well as other sign requests. They've been keeping up close with the easier SRs, a little bit behind on some of the other ones, which is what the backlog, which you said you didn't want, so, okay. Street management, a little bit, we're not at full staffing yet. We're going to be a little bit behind on medium-sized road repairs. So, potholes, we're out there, that's easy. Some of these medium curb and sidewalk repairs is where there's a little backlog falling off, and those crews should be coming in end of June, early July. So we've already gotten the reopening committee to agree for them to come back. So I've got this double-sided paper and I keep on going back and forth. All right, special events, that's starting up July 5th. So that'll be time for festival season, and it's going to take a couple weeks for some of these larger festivals to get through the process, but it's going to be exciting. So I'm excited that people are going to have fun and be in the city again. Inner harbor services, the harbor connector is up, the Charm City Circulator is up, which is not these services. So no major changes seen on these services due to the pandemic. Snow and ice control, no major changes. Vehicle impounding and disposal. When the pandemic first came, the auctions halted, which is a huge problem, but we were able to rebound so that we could clear out the lots and the yards. Still a little bit difficult to get all of the work done because we're not working or interfacing directly with the public. So I do want to thank the crews and the staff for being very nimble, moving through new and different ways to do things, and working primarily over the phone to get a lot of folks what they need. What sustainable transportation, full service at this time. Public rights of way landscape management, we're at about 90% there. We're hoping to, so the crews should be coming back by the end, all the crews at all times should be coming back by the end of the month. And hopefully we can tighten up the in-house work that we do, although probably 80% of the work gets done by contractual crews. Bridge and culvert management, no major changes that the citizens should see, but we'll be up to full staff at the end of the month. Parking enforcement, we're almost up to full staff, getting close. The primary things you will not be seeing right now are scofflaw, as well as peak hour enforcement. There should be pretty soon even more abandoned enforcement. So like I said, we had a large backlog in the tow yard, and that meant we had to do whatever we could to minimize the number of vehicles coming in. So we focused on abandons. We beat down the backlog, so we're down to the normal level of abandoned SRs outstanding, and hopefully soon we'll start adding some of these other parking enforcement things. Scofflaw probably next, but I don't have a date on that yet. Scofflaw being when we go around, find vehicles of folks that did not pay for their tickets over a long period of time, and then put a boot on them.
Director, that doesn't cover 48-hour rule, does it?
Scofflaw? No, but 48-hour rule will be coming probably at around the same time as scofflaw.
Can you just expand on why that is, specifically around scofflaw and 48-hour, and not so much peak hour restrictions, but why is that still suspended?
So 48 hours, we needed to. Can you guys hear me?
You're good. Yeah.
Okay. So scofflaw, 48 hours. We were suspending it initially because folks were more staying home and not necessarily moving their cars. 48 hours though is one of the ways that people get, that we can really catch the last abandons. So folks are now moving out, moving places. It keeps cars from staying in the same spot for quite a long time. We're not going to be heavy-handed with it, but we'll certainly respond to SRs once it's happening. So I don't have a final date for you yet. Scofflaw, we have waited this long because the scofflaw will take. Scofflaw also includes towing of certain folks, so we need to make sure that we could handle that within the tow yard. So it's going to be a couple weeks for that one, but 48 hours does not require the tow yard.
But Director, so just to confirm, if we got a vehicle that's been out, we got a van, let's say, that's been out there for a month, or a commercial vehicle in a residential neighborhood that's been out there for a month, we're going to cite and tow, correct?
Yes, although sometimes the vehicles are there legally when people don't feel they are, but yes, as long as we have the ability through the law to do so, we will be doing that.
Okay, so as long as it's within the confines of the law, you and Chief Goodwin will make it happen, and Chief Wilson will make it happen, right?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Survey control, the public should not see any changes there. Dockmaster, the main change is that we are not accepting funds, so we are not running the Dockmaster, I guess, fund taking operation. So free parking if you have a boat on the next to Harbor Place.
Can we explain why we're foregoing that revenue?
Oh yeah, we've never, even during the best years, we didn't make the money back. So we would be going around wasting gas money and time and losing money on the deal. So
Got it.
uh,
Good answer. It's not ideal, but it's a fair answer.
yeah, street cuts management, no major changes. We did have a slight, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a slight crew shortage, but nothing pandemic related here. We are always looking for inspectors, and we're in fact asking for a salary study on the inspectors, so we do have some vacancies there. Okay, traffic safety. Did I already do traffic safety? I keep on. All right, traffic safety. This crossing guards, we got them back out. COVID is not making a major impact on signs at this time, except for there are some pieces of equipment or materials that are starting to be backlogged through the international shipping channels. One of them is metal, some metal sign pieces, but we're trying to work through that right now. And real property management is currently, working at 100%, but not taking, and has been doing that, taking their permits in through, email and other public forms, not necessarily with a public walk-in. So, we'll look to see when we decide to reopen fully, in regards to allowing people to do walk-in permits, probably later into the summer, into the fall, keeping in line with the rest of the city's safety.
That's it, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Second question is around traffic calming and the process that DOT utilizes, as well as the process that a citizen or a community association would go through. My understanding of the process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that step one, the process is initiated. That's done through 311, as opposed to that archaic form that we used to have. So I want to thank you for that. Two, there's an investigation that's completed to determine feasibility for traffic calming. Three, there's some data collection that can be done with a speed sentry or a traffic count or things of that nature. Four, a determination is made by the department as whether or not to proceed. Number five, there's a review by the fire department as to whether or not fire is in support of it. Six, some type of community input, and I understand that that process has changed from a petition to get you to do it versus determining if residents are opposed to it. So we've made it a little easier to achieve traffic calming, which again, I'd like to commend you and your team for. And then seven, scheduling the work to be completed, weather permitting and where it fits in the queue, understanding that you have a backlog and that you have certain priorities and you're looking at traffic calming through a lens of equity, of course. So first question, first sub question here, do I have that process correct?
It sounds about right. Just in the terms of the engineering, I think there's the initial inspection, there's also the engineering of the either speed humps or other things. And yeah, and just to clarify on the way we do the public input. So the public input used to be that the people would have to get an X number of signatures on the block, which of course is a lot and difficult, especially if there's vacants on the block. So instead, we, at that point, when we find it there, we send mail to all the mailers out to all the folks on the block, and then they can either call or email to say no. So it really reduces the burden on the residents for that. So yeah, and there's other, you got it on the high level. So yes.
Okay, thank you. And where would that, you mentioned the engineering piece that I missed. Would that go, that goes somewhere in between data collection and determination to figure out what you're actually going to do, right? You got to figure, engineers got to tell you, no, we can't put a speed bump on this street. So instead we got to do something different. Maybe it's a grade issue. Maybe it's a width of the street issue, something like that. Is that, do I have that right?
Well, no, that at that point in time is when they're, have to design, quote unquote, design the humps for the street, which is more like a drawing that puts the locations of the humps or sizes of the humps so that the crews, when they actually do them, can know what to do. So we don't just say like, hey, put speed humps on the street. We actually have a drawing of the street and say, put, one here, one here, one here, and this is where you put them.
But that's kind of in step 4, that determination process, right? Or the determination step.
I would say it's usually right before the fire department step.
Okay, in between determination and the fire review. Okay. I think my one question on this process, I really appreciate that you all have taken proactive steps. 1, to get rid of this ridiculous asinine form that we used to have to fill out. And 2, changing the community input piece, especially in communities where we might have a low rate of responsiveness, and recognizing that there's an equity issue there. My one question and concern is around that fire department review, because oftentimes I feel like your team is going through all of this process and then they get to the fire department piece and then the fire department says no. So I'm wondering, is there an opportunity to move that fire department piece up in the process so we can get that out of the way? Because the fire department in reality is besides a capacity and funding issue for your team, the fire department is really the piece of this process that can hold things up. So is there a way we can figure out how to move that fire department piece to the front of the process?
Yeah, we're meeting with fire department, I think at the end of this week or early next, and we can definitely discuss that with them. So,
okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
And just to mention one other thing about one of the other big holdups in the process is the MUTCD, which is the federal laws in terms of how to and put speed bumps in and other things like that. We're trying to, grow our game a little bit, be a little bit more thoughtful or possibly a little more creative on how to make sure that we can meet those standards and put those down, because you're not allowed to put roadway implements in without following the MUTCD. So historically, we've been extremely by the book. We'll still be by the book and follow the rules, but we're trying to be more creative to make sure that the engineering meets what has to be met.
What does MUTC stand for again?
Manual of United.
Manual
I
of
don't
Uniform
even.
Traffic Control Devices.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yeah,
Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Yeah, I just say MUTCD.
So that's a national standard for like how we do streets, right?
Yeah, and actually the city's been pushing.
That's good enough. I don't.
Well, let me just mention.
Okay.
Let me get my plug in. The city
Sure.
has been pushing to, and part of a larger group of cities that are pushing to relax the standards. The standards are really written for suburban areas, so it's not and larger roads, and they don't really take into account the urban areas that we live in. So that's why we want that more flexibility on lots of different types of traffic controls.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's really helpful. And if you could please, this doesn't, Nina, Natasha, this doesn't need to be a request number, but Director, if you could keep me, or Liam, keep me updated on the results of that discussion with the fire department. I'm very interested to hear how that turns out. Councilwoman McCray, and then we will go to Councilman Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for asking my question about traffic calm, and I truly appreciate it. I'm going to move right into my second one. Director, we consistently speak about providing opportunities for our youth and careers to Baltimore City residents. I want to say our council member Stokes, Vice President Middleton, they are strongly always emphasizing apprenticeships. And I see in Service 681, it looks like we lost about $560,000 in federal funding for the Urban Youth Corps program. Is that correct?
Well, not exactly. So that was a fund that we had. So a lot of times you'll put in a federal, I guess, earmark, or not an earmark, money here to be for the money to come in. So when the federal money does come in, so that program, we left it open to say, yes, if we get the money, it comes in, but it ended probably about 4 years ago. So the money has stopped coming in for that program about 4 years ago. And I don't believe we've ever got that full amount of money. So we did, but it was really 4 years ago, but we were keeping it open in case the program restarted, which it did not.
Okay.
But I do want to mention that we have a close partnership with ROCA, and I know we have one ROCA crew. I'm trying to get us 2 ROCA crews on board. They help with some extra cleaning for us. They're a great program. I use them at DGS as well, so I'm a big fan, and I really think it's a great program.
So just to go back to that program, it hasn't been in place for 4 years. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? Or do I understand that correctly?
I want to say 3 or 4 years.
3 or
but
4
yes.
years? Okay. Whatever ways are we looking to strategically bring our young people in outside of the ROCA crews? I understand, like reaching out to Safe Streets, reaching out to ROCA. Whatever creative ways is DOT utilizing to bring our young people into the fold?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely haven't been able to get out and about as much, but we certainly want to. Sorry, my computer is installing things. Yeah, so stop, computer. So basically, we want to ramp our efforts up to get folks into CDL training, possibly get young folks with CDLs. That's the constant need across the city. CDL drivers and drivers. We've had some other programs at DGS where we had an apprenticeship for mechanics. We don't have a large number of positions the way we do have mechanics for that type of training, but we certainly want to hire as much as possible in the youth as laboring positions come up, as CDL positions comes up. We also are also having a new program with UB to have them possibly have some summer interns, because I really feel like a lot of times when you have these college students and undergraduates and graduates, you give them a start or an internship with the city, they end up staying longer as well. So we certainly need to improve our data staff, our engineering staff, our architecture staff, and also the chief of staff is working with MOAD as well to see what kind of staff can or what kind of opportunities there are.
Thank you, Director. Colleagues, and for our attendees, I'm going to be just vice chairing for a moment until Chair Costello returns. We're going to move to Councilman Stokes for the next question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, because you're chairing this meeting and you chair a committee here on the council. So, Director Sharkey, I just had mentioned that I'm doing this partnership with BCCC, the school system, and Merville Emerson Westside Skills Center. And because of pandemic, it kind of got pushed back. It's still a 4-year program. I would like to put you with VP President at Baltimore City Community College, because I know the city have a shortage of CDL drivers. They offer that at BCCC. So maybe we can get some of those young people, what you talking about, Madam Chair, into the BCCC, go there free, and then they can route them right back to the city, and they can be employed in the city. Also, about 2015, at that time, Mayor Stephanie Rollins was the mayor, and Councilman Carl Stokes, who's not my father, was the councilman, and one of the streets collapsed. I don't know if you remember, Director Sharp. Well, since I've been at council, the street collapsed like 5 years later at Calvert and 23rd Street. And we were able with DOT to get maybe about, with the help of Liam Davis, to get about $450,000 to redo the street, but it's not actually a street. It's a part of it is you can drive through the alley. The other part is green space. And I would like for, I don't know if you ever seen it, Director Shorter or Director Sharkey, that's a nice piece to do some traffic calming. Look at what they did over in Charles Village. And I just want to maybe one day we can go look at that, because that it enables the community to use the park, not a dog park, but a park with green space, and the other side of the street is just the traffic just going one way. And I thought that was a great piece for other communities to look at in terms of traffic calming. That's just my comments, and maybe we can do that one day. And Mr. Director Sharkey has put you with the VP of BCCC. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Stokes, for your comments. We're going to move on to Councilman Bullock at this time.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree with you around traffic calming. I think we had a lot of the same questions. The one thing I'll just mention in terms of traffic calming, just the time that it takes in terms of getting some of those improvements in place. I know we have a couple places in Southwest Baltimore where we've had a number of accidents, particularly on Lombard Street. I know it's been a challenge getting folks out there, but can you speak to some of the long-term solutions? I know there have been some short-term ones in terms of some cones and some barriers, but that's one thing that we're kind of challenged with. We get the opportunity to put in those traffic studies, but oftentimes they seem like they don't really go anywhere.
Yeah, and that's and you know, like I mentioned before, we are doubling the number of traffic engineering staff, which probably would still be laughable in other major American cities. So we are, you know, I'm seeing how well and how far these traffic engineers can work to make those traffic improvements. Now, when we talk about traffic calming historically in Baltimore, we usually are responding to SRs for residential speed humps. But what you're talking about is also an issue on the west side with some of these streets that were converted to two-way streets. One-way streets that were two-way streets and people speed on them, as well as some other cut-through areas in West Baltimore. So we're looking at options for both improving, of course, like we said, residential speed humps, but also some of these corridors and calming. Those are not as cheap and easy. We've had success last year in some areas, and we want to continue to look for more success in terms of road diets, as well as road diets, as well as parking changes in particular areas. So we have the engineering staff. We have a contract now that helps us to put the striping in, and we're also putting a bike ped contract that I think today, tomorrow, or no, next week will the bids will be in, which will also give us that ability for the engineers to design those types of complete street treatments. It was very difficult in the past for us to even implement those. So even if we had the money, we had to go on a change order on another contract, and it just didn't work. We have a striping contract now, which works really well for just striping, but we're going to have a bike ped contract, which can also add other features such as bump outs and speed humps. So we're hoping to see good improvements. And I definitely know, though, just want to mention, though, the need is way greater than our abilities, but we're going to continue to grow our abilities and get better each year. We had some good success last year. We're going to have good success this year. And hopefully, as we grow the engineering and the planning staff, we can do even more.
I'll say, Director Sharkey, I really appreciate what you talked about in terms of hiring more engineers and the planning side of it. I also feel your pain, having been a transportation planner in the past. I understand some of the challenges that we deal with. I think oftentimes the perception is that it's going to be a speed hump, but thinking about what the other alternatives are in those places. And I'm also glad you talked about also some of the parking, angle parking, other parking ways that we can cut down some of these issues. So look forward to doing some continued work with you, and thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Bullock. We're moving on to Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got I got a bunch of questions, but I'll ask a couple of simple ones, specifically around the Circulator. So the Circulator recently added 12 new buses to the fleet, and 6 of the buses went into service in early 2020, and another 6 went into service in March 2021. I know the state just announced an effort to electrify all of its buses, I believe half of which by 2030. and 95% of all their buses by 2045. Are we at all thinking about ways to have a more eco-friendly approach to transportation in our fleet? And is that something that we can explore potentially by 2045 or otherwise?
Certainly. What I like to do when I get new equipment is I like to see somebody close by use it and use it well. So I'm excited to see the MTA and work hand in hand with them. And I do believe we will be moving to that forwards. I don't want to just put dates on it arbitrarily. So the buses hopefully should last 15 or so years, 15 to 20 years. So it'll take some long-term planning, but I'm definitely interested in that type of long-term planning to make sure that the buses become more eco-friendly over time.
And Director, I just wanted to let the councilman know that DGS is currently pursuing grants for putting in the charger infrastructure for city fleet vehicles. So that's something that Department of General Services is working on. So the city is putting itself in a position to do that. But it is going to, as the director said, going to be more long term.
Good to know, and of course, eager to help in that regard. I think we'll very quickly find ourselves probably transitioning as a country. 2050 will be here pretty soon, and I think electrical cars are the future, and I expect by then won't be much of an option. The other question I had was also tied to the circulator. You guys updated one of your performance measures to on-time performance of the circulator, changing that over from the average circulator headway during rush hour minutes. I'm just not sure what it means. Can you guys explain what that means, the on-time performance of the circulator?
Are you looking in the budget book?
Budget book, page 389.
Okay.
Volume 2, of course.
Okay. It's 26, 33, 35, 37. Making me do my Roman numerals here, man. Okay. So
So it's another service.
okay, yeah. So so we have somewhat of a route schedule. It's not publicly available, but we do have a route schedule. And so even though it's more internal at the time, the folks are supposed to have a certain rhythm that they go. So if you're a bus driver, there's a certain thing called a layover where at a certain point in time, you stop at a certain place for 3 to 5 minutes to pick up extra passengers. There's places that you have predetermined bathroom breaks. And so interestingly enough, so we track that now. We have some better data than we did before. So we didn't really have that, or data analysis abilities. So our data analysis abilities are there. So, it's really to see if the buses are bunching or not. So if too many drivers decide to go fast or speed up, one slows down, one speed up, the buses bunch, as well as, or the buses start getting further apart. So this is more to make sure that they are consistent through their timing. So we're tracking that. It was actually interesting that during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, the buses were too fast. Of course, that has changed. We're getting back to more of a normal schedule that we're going to be following. So it's really, do they meet within a particular time frame, stop to stop? So that's really what it looks at there. And the numbers will be improving, especially starting in March of fiscal 2021. So it's a good improvement.
Does that mean that, and forgive me if this is just a stupid question, does that mean that lower is better or higher is better, or is there
No,
like
it just
a
means
higher
higher is better.
Okay.
But a lot of times, not always, it's the drivers aren't late, they were early. So we rejiggered some of the routes to try to compensate for that, and we'll probably do that every 2 years or so to rejigger the routes. We of course need to also look at the Circulator overall. Now just recall that Circulator is a very small bus system. We've got 20 buses. MTA has 750 buses. So it's really, you know, we're not a huge thing that can totally change everything within Baltimore. But you know, there should be future look at the different, you know, routes, where they go, all that. We're going to be having you know, a new planner come on board, hopefully in the next 3 to 5 months, as well as probably conduct a larger study on that when the transit planner comes in. So the city does not have an actual transit planner. If you're a transit planner, a bike planner, or a pedestrian planner looking at this, come work for me. It's going to be awesome. So go to baltimorecity.gov website, and we're just looking for, you know, multimodal people to come work for us, and you know, going to build that staff. So we've got the engineers, and we need more planners too.
I appreciate the shameless plug.
Yeah.
we need talented people, and I certainly wouldn't sell the Circulator short. You know, it looks like we serve anywhere from 2 to 3 million people, or excuse me, individual riders or rides a year, which is pretty impressive given
Oh
the
yeah,
size
no,
of
of
the system.
course. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I don't want to discount the Circulator. It's, you know, we want it to be amazing and awesome, and as tourists start coming back, it's going to be, you know, the numbers are going to go up. So I certainly don't want to discount it. I just want to make sure that we realize that it can't fix all of the transportation ills or the transit ills in Baltimore.
That's right. No, you're absolutely right there. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Councilmember Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies, my connection has been spotty, so rather than going in and out, I'm just going to do audio for my questions, but I'll keep them really quick. Director Sharkey, the first question I had was around I don't know if it was called Project Light, or essentially the large-scale effort to convert the street lights to LEDs. Can you let us know where that stands? I couldn't really make it out in the budget. I know that it was paused during the last fiscal year due to the pandemic. Are there plans to continue those conversions? That's a question I get a lot from constituents wondering what's happening with that.
Yeah, so Be More Bright was based upon something called an ESCO contract, and this was actually, it happened about the same time as the pandemic, but happened, you know, so, but it was not pandemic related. So something called an ESCO contract, which is an energy savings contract. So as we put more energy efficient lights in, then we get energy savings over time and also maintenance savings. So it's sort of, we take out a loan, we borrow the money, we fix or change the lights, and then we make savings over time. And then the savings pay for the initial loan and improvements. So when Be More Bright, and this is 98% before my time, Be More Bright was, you know, focusing on certain equity zones. They were called VRI zones at the time, as well as some other areas that we, you know, changed towards LED lights. We, at that time, and this was before the pandemic, the price or value of the loans was not as favorable. We still have an engineer, so we weren't really able to go and get the amount of money that we needed to really continue the program at the time, just based on the ESCO loans that we were using. We are re-looking at that now. Of course, the world has changed 2 times over. There might be future, you know, streams of other money to supplement. And I would, I did do an estimate recently. It's going to cost us 35 to 40 million to get the rest of the city that we are in charge of on LED lights, which of course is quite a large amount. But you know, we're definitely looking to see if we can scrape in another couple $1 million and keep building it up over time.
I mean, my ask for that, I definitely understand that, would be if you could, to prioritize areas that were sort of in that start or stop. I have a couple neighborhoods that, you know, a few blocks got it, but then the, you know, next block over didn't. And so of course the questions are always, well, you know, why did they get it, or we did, you know, just sort of concerns about equity. The second It's more of a statement, Madam Chair, just on that, because I didn't want to beat the horse of the traffic calming process. But if you all could consider providing updates along the way for constituents, so that they know, this thing is moved from, DOT is going to be out with the traffic century on this day to this day. Okay, we've done that. Now it's been referred to this agency. Just like some sort of ongoing communication, so people don't feel like it's a black hole where they just, they initiate the request. Maybe they've even seen the century, but then they just don't hear anything after that. And then that's usually when they're calling my office, or I'm sending information, requests to your staff to say, hey, what's going on? Where's this at? Just more of a statement there, and just trying to improve sort of the step-by-step communication, so people, we can better manage expectations on how long things may take, and more importantly, people feel like that things, even if they are moving slowly, that they're still moving.
Yeah, and that's completely
All I
fair.
have for this round, Madam Chair.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you so much, Councilmember Burnett. We're going to move to Councilmember Schleifer for questions. We will come back to you, Councilmember Schleifer. At this time, we're going to Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Sharkey. Appreciate your partnership, especially on recent events and all that your team does. Wondered if you could talk a little bit about sort of the return to school. And we know that transportation for our young people to and from school is a major challenge. A lot of it is done by the MTA. But I think especially in this next coming year, where we're going to see, I think, just a lot of young people that are coming out of the pandemic will be in pretty rough shape in terms of how, especially our high school kids, get to and from school, knowing that the trips can be up to an hour and a half. Can you talk a little bit about how DOT intends to augment or support getting young folks to and from school in a way that's expeditious and doesn't lead to the kind of learning loss that is all too common in Baltimore?
So there's two main programs that we have in terms of getting kids to school. Of course, number one is our crossing guard program. And also, again, if you're looking for a job, go on the Baltimore City website. We are looking for crossing guards. So, we always need crossing guards. It's so of course that's very important. That's the first person that the kid sees on their way into school. We also have the program with planning in the 21st century schools to improve the sidewalks and striping around those schools to get them in safer. So that's the next piece. The third piece is we did have a meeting with MONSE and another nonprofit group to look at that issue, because there is sort of a large number of detriments on the way to school, especially for kids in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades that might live in West Baltimore and go to school in Northeast or something, and take 2 or 3 buses. So, we did talk with MONSE. We could consider, if there are certain areas where that need shelters, we might try to work with MTA or others. But again, that's also a lot of their issues were with crime per se on the buses. So I'm looking forward to the follow-up conversation on that.
Thank you, Director. And again, I would just encourage you to lean in on that topic. I think that the amount of kids that end up spending up to an hour and a half just trying to get to school is pretty ridiculous in our city. And I think it's got to be an all-in effort. And certainly your agency, though not the prime agency, should play a role in that. Second question relates to pedestrian safety, and just a sense, Councilmember Dorsey passed a major complete streets overhaul in the last council. I think there is a feeling that it's been some fits and starts with complete streets. I know that in some of our neighborhoods, there's a feeling like we're still, some of our communities feel like superhighways and still feel like we really built in a way that prioritizes getting folks who live in the county or in some other place into the city and quickly getting them out of the city. My hope, I think the council's hope was that we would really be shifting that lens toward more of a complete streets, local, walkable, bikeable, community that really serves Baltimoreans first. Could you talk a little bit about where we are in terms of moving away from prioritizing folks who do not live in our city coming into our city? And look, we know they need to come and work, and that's fine, but prioritizing Baltimoreans to be able to travel more efficiently.
Yeah, and like I said about the complete streets, we're hiring towards that. So in the past, you're right, we've been, how do we get folks downtown quick? How do we get folks in and out quick? And of course, that means a car is driving quickly past somebody's house. So that's of course not necessarily, that's not really, I guess, how the city was designed initially. And so we do have quite a speeding problem within the city. It's quite apparent. So, so the first thing is, of course, as we move into each project and we have the right type of staff and the other staff, we're training, bringing them along to have a complete streets mindset, so that when they do a project, or either large or small, try to add complete streets elements in, wherever possible, or change the thought of the process. So it's, we've got the smaller level traffic calmings, but when we do larger streetscapes or even bridge projects, how can we add a piece in to make it better for the bicyclists, make it better for the pedestrians, or even just add bus lanes across the city? Because, like I said before, 30% of our residents do not own a car. That means they take the bus. So prioritizing buses prioritizes city residents. So yeah, that's certainly the mindset. I would say that it's going to be a long-term change. It's going to be, as roads get redone and changed, that's when we'll be able to make the changes. Now, of course, we want to make traffic calming on the most troublesome intersections. We have 15 or 16 intersections probably in the next year or so that will be improving based upon the highest crash data on those intersections. So we're starting with a number of different programs, but I don't want to give the thought that we're going to be able to transform the city overnight. It's going to take lots of time, lots of money, lots of planning over time. But I'm excited that we're, kind of turned the train into the right direction, and we're going to start pushing it as hard as we can.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sharkey. Again, we know that folks need to get to work, need to get in and out of the city, but they also don't pay taxes into our roads, and we do. And so I think prioritizing Baltimoreans and how we use the streets and the roads and the buses, I think, is really key. Thanks again, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're going to go to Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for not having my camera on. Similar to Councilmember Burnett, my internet is a little spotty here in South Baltimore, so my apologies again. My first question has to do with really inquiring about the routes of the Circulator. So as many know, the Circulator, while it goes through South Baltimore, it does not have consistent stops in South Baltimore. And so I'm wondering, moving forward, have you all thought about increasing or expanding the Circulator routes into South Baltimore so that more residents of South Baltimore can participate and engage in some of those transit opportunities that many within the city, particularly in the White L, often experience every day?
Yeah, and I did mention previously that we're hiring a transit planner, and we'll also be conducting a larger study to look at where the Circulator routes are globally. So the Circulator started out as 2 routes. I don't know, probably seems like forever ago, 12 or 15 years ago, maybe not that long, but seems like that long. And so it started out with those 2 routes, and it was just a compact downtown thing. Then, and it was based upon the downtown parking taxes. So it was parking taxes on garages was what funded it. And then it got popular and expanded to different areas for particular different reasons, and was not expanded equitably. So we want to look at the circulator system with our planner and a consultant to really look at ways to make it more equitable, and possibly rejigger routes in the future to make them more user friendly for the citizens, but also, like I said, something that is equitably distributed.
Thank you so much for that commitment, Director Sharkey. I applaud your efforts in that movement forward. My only concern is that I don't want us to wait another 10 to 15 years for us to begin to implement some of those equitable routes that you're discussing. I applaud your efforts in moving in that direction. I just don't want us to wait another 10 to 15 years for us to get routes in South Baltimore. So.
Yeah, it won't, certainly the changes won't be 10 to 15 years, but they will be taking some time, as there will be a large number of public hearings, as well as community outreach. And then also there'll have to be, certain FTA, Federal Transit Administration guidelines that are met as well.
Sure. Thank you so much. My next question actually has to deal with the coordination of traffic lights across the city. So we've been actually getting numerous complaints here in South Baltimore about a particular intersection. It's the Russell Street. I can't remember the cross street, but it's a street light on Russell Street, and it's just a particularly long light. Can you speak to some of the coordination that your agency is doing to coordinate traffic lights across the city? Because as we've seen in other major cities like LA, the coordination of those lights impedes and impacts daily traffic. And so we want to make sure that people are getting in and out the city. While we want them to stay in the city, we want them to get in and out the city as efficient as possible. And traffic light coordination is one of those metrics whereby we can do that for the citizens of Baltimore and the people that come into our city every day.
So first piece, I'm assuming you're talking about Russell and Hamburg. That's a persistent issue.
There you go.
That we will check into again. Interestingly enough, there was a person there that was soliciting funds a couple years ago and was able to turn the lights in a certain way. Anyway, they put that they could make the traffic lights longer. We fixed the particular push button so they couldn't keep the push button on continuous repeat. That is a very busy intersection, so it's not always going to be the fastest, but we can double check to make sure, because I would say that you're right in terms of the most busy intersections. You've got, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 of the most busy intersections in your district. So we will we'll have them go and make sure that Russell and Hamburg are there, or up to speed. Something else is that our city traffic signal infrastructure, in terms of the connectivity, is not up to par. We have a $20 million capital project coming, hopefully in the next year or two. I mean, it's in design to retime traffic lights and to hook them up, more of them, the ones downtown and around the downtown core, into the traffic management center. So that will also improve. But we're also going to be retiming the traffic lights. We have not retimed the traffic lights for many, many years, but that will also be with a complete streets focus to make sure that pedestrians can get across. So we will look at Hamburg and Russell. So.
Sure. And thank you so much, Director Sharkey.
Thank you.
Thank you. And colleagues, just a gentle reminder, let's make sure that we're putting ourselves back on mute just after we're asking our questions. We're going to move on to Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just talk for a second about the traffic calming policy and the work that's been done on this, because a number of people have brought this up, and I think that I can offer some insights on this. I did forward some correspondence to the chair after his initial questions on this. I've been working very intensively with DOT staff on this traffic calming policy for about the last half a year at this point, and was given the opportunity to comment on a draft proposal a few months ago, and I forwarded my comments that I sent to DOT staff over to the chair this evening. In my comments, it directly addressed his concern about the placement in the step order of where the fire department was involved, specifically saying that they needed to be earlier in the process, if at all. But really, DOT has the in-house capacity to know the classifications of roads where the fire department would have problems with that anyway. So their fire department concerns should rarely arise anyway, but moving that earlier in the process is a critical part. Also in those comments addressed Councilman Burnett's concern about constant feedback. I requested that DOT develop an online system where any citizen can see the status of all traffic calming requests and what stage it would be in that whole long process. I've also followed up on that with the Chief of Staff, Adria Turner, who I just think is one of the most incredibly strong hires that the department has made and the city has made in recent months. And I know that she fully understands that feedback that I provided. And I left that conversation feeling very positive about the direction that this policy is going. And I'm glad to have any further conversation with any of my colleagues about that ongoing effort as well. I wanted to come back to the other kind of initial conversation that the chair had raised about scofflaw, and there's kind of a nexus to scofflaw and to towing, as the director kind of touched on. I want to say, we can't start scofflaw soon enough. I mean, this really needs to happen, and for me, this is because it's a safety issue. 9 months ago, I came across a vehicle that had been parked in an alley in my district for 3 or 4 months, and DOT wasn't ticketing it or removing it from that location because there was no sign that said that it couldn't be parked there. But when you looked up this vehicle, it had about a dozen speeding tickets from ATVES cameras, meaning that basically every time this car was taken out briefly, this person was a menace on the city's streets, creating safety problems at a time of heightened safety problems. And we were not using the tools that we have at our disposal to get those safety issues taken off of our streets. And there was just another one that was brought to my attention about a week or so ago, where I think that there were maybe 50 tickets issued to this car during the time of the pandemic, all from speed cameras and red light cameras that this driver was running. We cannot restart scofflaw soon enough because we have serious safety problems on our hands, and the worst offenders are the ones that would be easiest to get just by putting a boot on the car and immobilizing it. That said, I'm very concerned about our towing capacity, and that also has a direct budgetary concern to it. Every year, this conversation of in-house towing versus contractual towing for DOT becomes a part of some conversation or other. And one of the things that we continue to hear back is that our in-house towing operations generate a significant amount of revenue, but we can't do that if we're not doing the towing. We can't generate that revenue if we're not doing the towing ourselves. We basically negate that by contracting it out, and we're contracting that work out to a very significant degree presently, and we're on target to contract out even more of it. We have 16 fully funded positions in the budget for towers. They fall under the CDL description. 10 of them are filled presently. 2 of those drivers are scheduled to retire this year, so we're about to be at 50% capacity, and we're already significantly contracting this out. Mind you, a number of those towers have to just
Councilman,
be-
thank you so much for your background.
Yeah.
Is there a question?
Yeah, there's a question. What are we going to do to get towers hired? Because I keep getting reminded that a compensation study was already done just a couple of years ago, but our compensation is 30% lower than the market rate. And so we can't hire these people for CDL, and we're asking them to do. You can make more just having a CDL and not have any towing skills. And you can make more as a tower and not have a CDL, both in the private sector. And we're requiring people to have towing skills and a CDL and paying them 30% less than the private market. And that's why we can't hire these drivers. And the position is frozen right now. Are we going to get it unfrozen? What are the top positions here that we're going to get unfrozen so that we can restart some things?
Yeah. Yes, we had 2 conversations about this last week. Don't worry about the frozen or unfrozen positions. We have a number of CDL positions throughout the agency that can be filled. So don't worry about the frozen portion. The pay portion is a huge issue. Whether the person has a CDL or not, our pay has for CDLs has really fallen behind. I think the pandemic, I was reading something recently that CDL drivers are making more and more money since the pandemic as well. So even though this was just 2 years ago that the CDL study was done, we need to relook at that. I've also investigated already with DGS to see if any or which of our vehicles could be operated by non-CDL drivers. So many of them can. We're just looking to figure out why everybody required the CDL for so long. So we're trying to figure that piece out. But if we don't see a compelling reason not to, we would certainly consider bringing in towers that do not have CDLs.
I mean, I think it's good to hear that, because I've been asking this question about the driver assignment to vehicles for a while. Rather than not being able to hire CDL people, it would make a lot more sense to just contract out the heavy vehicles to contractors and just have everybody operating on a standard fleet in-house. I mean, right now, by paying people $20,000, I mean, if we paid 16 people $20,000 more each year, it would come at a cost of $320,000 to the department. And for that, right now, we're probably foregoing $3 million in revenue loss. So we really need to get this towing hiring issue worked out. The other question I have is about, I mean, you said not to worry about the CDL positions and being frozen or not. What is the status of the frozen positions in the parking enforcement section? Is that going to be a priority to unfreeze those positions? I see we're losing 11 positions that were salary saved, I believe, last year, or maybe it was 12 positions that were salary saved, where the pins still existed, but they were unfunded. I assume that those are the positions that we're losing this year, but in this budget. But what about the frozen positions? When are we going to unfreeze them so that we've got 9 people patrolling the city for all parking enforcement from 3 to 11 right now? That's untenable.
So there was, if you recall, during the last administration, there was a group of layoffs. And so there was probably about 6 parking enforcement agents laid off. We currently have a few vacancies. I can't look at the sheet right now because I don't know what page number we're on. But we do have vacancies, and after we fill up the crossing guards, be happy to look as we finally to rehire or hire new parking control agents as we as the revenues start rebounding, as scofflaw and the other things come back online.
Okay, I'll just say it again. There are 9 people doing all of the parking enforcement from 3 to 11 for the whole city right now. That can't work for us to perform parking enforcement effectively. We need to unfreeze these positions. We need to get these people hired. And I have had a lot of conversations about this with Toby, and I hope that we can get those positions listed for hiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions, Councilman Dorsey. We're going to move on to Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. And thanks to DOT and the team for all you're doing. Where do I start? I am wondering about the street cuts management folks. I think you play a very important role. I am frustrated, however, that it still seems to be, with one exception, that BGE continues to come in after we've done a bunch of work and tears up the street anyway. And so I'm wondering how we can be better at that. And the exception I'm going to say is that we were able to figure out that BGE was going to be on Greenmount Avenue as we were doing streetscaping, because one of my businesses saw that somebody from BGE was doing surveying. And so I would have had this beautiful streetscape and then BGE go in. And so we've got to do better coordination with them. I know a lot of the onus is on them because they don't coordinate very well either. I now have this issue, and this is going on citywide, but I'm just making these examples on the 3100 block of St. Paul Street. $13 million went into the streetscaping area of that whole area, and it's now going to be completely torn up by BGE. So I think we need to really figure out how we're going to address this issue, either by working with them to come in with all of their projects ahead of time, rather than just, going on to whatever that thing is called, vision or whatever it's called. It has to be addressed in terms of the coordination. So I wonder if you can comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, there's currently, starting in March or February, we have weekly meetings with BGE, Water, and DOT to start talking about all those particular things. Now, the one thing, there's lots of that. There's the discussion, there's the talk every week. We also need to move towards a better permitting system. Our permitting system, there's other better things that are out there. So we're looking at improving that as well, because that can find a better deconfliction. So yes, there are meetings where the people just boringly talk about different large jobs. It's not perfect, but it's something that was implemented way back when I was at DGS, and we re-implemented that starting in March. So we're hoping to see less of that, but I don't want to make any promises, especially when there's emergency cuts, or other things that happen. But we certainly agree that that needs improvement. We also need more street cut inspectors over time, and we need to improve the IT infrastructure to get a better deconfliction.
I completely understand emergencies. Gas leak, absolutely, they need to be there. I get that. In both of these cases, they're not emergencies. So I'm glad that you're on it and thinking that through. Could you explain, totally different subject, going back to the circulator, it's funded by special funds. What are those funds? So
the circulator is primarily funded by tax revenue, which I believe is 4% on parking garages. Somebody might need to follow up and say the exact amount, but I believe it is that.
That's right, Steve. That's right, Steve.
Look at that. However, the circulator initially funded 2 routes, or 3 routes, green, orange, and purple were initially funded by that amount of money. However, over time, the circulator extended further north on the purple route, further south, right, a little bit further east, and then and then also the banner was added through a federal grant. However, the federal grant ended And now the city's general fund also does kick in for the circulator.
Thanks. I just didn't see the source in the budget book, so I appreciate that. I'll get my other questions in on the next round. Thank you very much.
Okay, I do want to come back to Councilman Schleifer, if you're still with us. And we're going to move into the second round. Bear with me, folks. I just want to make sure that I don't miss anyone. We're going to move into the second round. Director, slow streets. Let's talk about slow streets. First, I want to applaud you guys for putting together slow streets in such a short amount of time. Some things went well, some things did not. Can we talk about if that program is going to be coming back and what it would look like?
Yeah, so Slow Streets was quite an exciting program, and got more comments about that, both positive and negative, than probably anything else we've ever done, because we pretty much just put traffic devices in the middle of the road. So it's certainly we're doing our follow-up study on it. I really think it's a great conversation piece. So there was one in my neighborhood, someone that I see riding my bikes around, and I'd see it looked like it would work well in some places, looked like it wouldn't work well in other places. So overall, this is my opinion with the lessons. I really thought that when the slow street tied into a zone or an amenity, it worked better. So obviously the lake is just an amazing asset, an improved asset on the city, but of course that's a full closure. But some of the other areas, I think people really just wanted traffic calming. So we are going to be implementing a newer slow streets program. That slow streets program will include, and they're on order, new high quality traffic control devices. So we had to just pull together and grab what we could and make them as quick as possible, basically, in the backyard. So those were literally crafted by DOT employees. But no, so we're going to have improved barricades, and we're going to have a lot more community engagement when we go into each individual community to talk about it, and also use it as an entree to discuss that and other types of traffic calming. So it seems like what people 80% of the time wanted was traffic calming, and not as much the barriers. But as they're improved, it'll be great. I know this isn't necessarily a slow street, but if anybody else visited the Charles Street Promenade, that was an amazing event. Seeing these type of pop-up events in the future could also be a strong way to have slow streets. There's other cities that do that, where they'll take a long stretch of road over a weekend and let kids ride bikes on it, everything else. I loved the Charles Street Promenade. I thought it was great, and hopefully consider continuing those as well. We're finalizing our look at the previous slow street program, and then hopefully looking for newer slow streets. But again, it's going to be a lot more focused on the community, a lot more discussion. So we're going to take more time with each individual treatment, so that the people don't get blindsided, or that the people don't necessarily, they feel more a part of it and more invested in what's going on in that neighborhood.
Thank you. You answered my follow-up question within your response. I'm going to move to some other colleagues. If you have additional questions, please use the raise hand function. I'm going to start with the two hands that I see right now, and the one in front of me, Councilman Stokes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Sharkey, we talked about the Circulator, I think about 4 or 5 years ago. We bought our buses from a French company, I believe, and they actually went out of business, and we got stuck with the maintenance with the Circulator. My question is, are we still the different company, and are they going to be responsible for the maintenance of those buses? Because we got caught with this other company about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes. So that was the That was the bus operator. So that was not the
Okay.
purchasing. So we are buying buses from way upstate New York now. And actually the company is a French company, actually, but they're French Canadian.
I got ESP.
Yeah, but they're French Canadian though. So it wasn't about the purchasing of the buses. It was about the maintenance of the buses through the previous vendor. It was Veolia was the vendor at the time. We had a contentious relationship, and but now we have a new vendor, and I believe that will be out to bid. That's a 3-year deal, and I believe we'll be out to a new bid in about a year's time frame. I want to say for the next for the next contract of bus operations. And yes, that the maintenance is required. We have some consultant staff on board to try and push for as much maintenance as possible to make sure that the new buses get maintained properly as they did not in the previous time.
Thank you. Real quick, my second question, the electric charging stations, is there some benefits there for the community if they have them installed? Because I know that there's some benefits up in Clifton Park. They have electric charging stations at the Clifton Mansion. Is there some benefits for the community? Because we getting into these electric cars now, and I was wondering, is there benefits for the community if they have them installed in the community? Is there some benefits to the community with those electric charging stations?
Sure, and I'll take that. That's a great question, Councilman. Back in 2019, we started up DOT along with some of our sister agencies at Parking Authority, General Services, Law Department, HCD, and Rec and Parks. Might have mentioned Parking Authority already. We started up a work group, a EV work group, and really the goal of that group was to really tighten up the city's electronic vehicle policy. And also work with a grant program that BGE has with the Public Service Commission. Through this work group, we determined as far as public right-of-way, we are not permitting private chargers on public right-of-way. The city of Philadelphia ran into issues where private chargers were put in front of private homes on public right-of-way, and it essentially became a way for people to secure their own parking space in front of their car. We're not doing that in the city. What we're focusing on is improving access to public chargers. So last term, we had an MOU that was drafted that included a geographic equity policy to make sure that the chargers aren't only going to be concentrated in certain sections of the city, but we're requiring a minimum of I think 30% in the census tracts with the lowest quartile of household income, median income for the city. And you know, we also passed a franchise agreement through the city council last term. You were one of the people who signed on. And that kind of spells out the rules and regulations that BGE will have to adhere to with these public chargers and be a template going forward. So the long story short, the first charger under that program that's going to be unveiled will be unveiled in Druid Hill Park, and that's going to be in a couple weeks. And I believe we have 35 to 50 chargers that are currently in the pipeline that we'll start to see installed over the next several months into next year. So we're 100% behind increasing the city's public electronic vehicle charger infrastructure because we know that that's coming.
Real quick, Madam Chair, can we get a list of those new charging stations?
Yeah.
Council, it's just a request if that's all right, Madam Chair.
Sure, we absolutely can.
Okay, thank you.
And Natasha and Nina, can we place that request down? Thank you, Councilman Stokes, because you're on it. We're going to move on to Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask a question about our favorite thing, potholes. Director Sharkey, I was looking at the metrics on potholes. It looks like we're still doing pretty strong by way of closing potholes within 48 hours. We're at 98% in 2020 and usually hover somewhere between 97 and 100% The question that I have though is a little bit more nuanced. I know one of the issues that we often see with regard to closing potholes is sometimes they are related to other agencies. And this ties to the whole close means close issue. For instance, what may happen is that what may be perceived by a constituent as a pothole is actually a early sinkhole formed by a water leak. So how do we communicate that through our 3-on-1 response? And how do we coordinate with water and wastewater to make sure that when folks do have complaints about potholes, that those issues, even if they aren't technically potholes, we don't send the wrong message by closing it out, but rather make sure that the issue as they understood it is resolved.
I'm definitely going to have to think on that one because we tell them to go out there and throw that gravel down. I certainly think that if they recognize a larger issue, they call it out. We can talk to them about how they make sure to maybe go back to the yard and put an SR into 311 or get the SR transferred. But if they don't see the issue and they see a pothole, they're just going to cover up the issue. And we can talk to them a little bit more about specifically the water leaks, but I can't. So, and I think if they see active water leaking, it's not a problem. But frequently, you're right, though, it can be a sinkhole that is not active water bubbling up on the ground. And if it's not
Director, sorry to interrupt you. I want to make the question a little bit easier. Actually, I'm not. I'm assuming that in one of these instances, the crew that goes out there notices that the problem is more complicated. They realize that it's not just a pothole. In instances where they may close it out and say, look, this is something that needs to be addressed by DPW water and wastewater. Hopefully they don't close it out is what I want to address.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. I can definitely talk with our data folks and the maintenance division to make sure that we have a good policy for especially handing things off to water. So you're right. They probably just say TCO and move forward. So I think that's a good point.
Great. Appreciate that. And yeah, I think, and this is something we see across all of our agencies that frequently interact with 3-on-1 requests that go across agencies. So you guys are 100% not alone on this. And I think we more broadly, and I think this is something certainly the city administrator Shorter is probably thinking about how we can make sure that transfer between agencies doesn't result in closing out an SR and giving the wrong signal to constituents. The other question I have is also tied to road maintenance or street management. I was looking at the number of lane miles surfaced by internal crews and then the percentage of lane miles completed by contractors. More broadly, the question I have is how do we increase our lane miles? You know, of course, while you were at city stat, while I was at city stat, something that we tracked relentlessly, and knowing that just the right amount of attention on it can go a long way towards making sure that we have all our ducks in a row when paving season begins, like it probably is now. But yeah, I think we can start there. What do we need to do to make sure that we can be as effective as possible in paving and getting our best bang for our buck here?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking to improve the pavings, the way we do paving, especially through ADA, and complete streets. So for in-house jobs, we're going to be improving and doing more ADA and complete streets work, minimal because it's usually residential work there, which will add costs. So as we do more complete street treatments, it will slightly decrease the number of lane miles that we do. And that especially is true for the larger paving that we do through our contractors. So the way to, on that side of the house, there's of course financial limits, but we are investing into making sure that whenever we do the work in the future, we meet the ADA requirements, and we make sure that it's as complete streets friendly as possible, which in many of these designs, which you'll be seeing later in the summer, are going to be having more bump outs, visibility, more traffic control as we put it in these larger jobs. And we've been slowly adding complete streets elements, but with the more engineers, we're going to design more. So we're probably, so honestly, we're going to have a slight decrease in lane miles, but we're going to have an increase in complete streets treatments. And so really over time, you've got the amount of money that you have, and we work within those confines.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I didn't think about that. I know, and thinking about my previous tracking of these numbers, I know, year in, year out, we were nearing 200 lane miles between in-house paving and contractors. And for the metrics here, it noted that we did 64 lane miles in 2020, 34 of which were internal. So of course, then meaning that 30 of those other miles came from contractors. So much lower than what we've done in the past. But I think that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. We're trying to get more done within that period. I wonder if that's the correct balance with with our ability to keep up with the maintenance of roads over time. Of course, one of the major concerns that you're 100% aware of is that if we don't repave a street in enough time, it can fall into disrepair, and then you need to do a whole new engineering project and start at the grade level. It's much more expensive to do. So, I'm sure you guys are thinking about all those pieces. Just want to sort of flag that as something that if we're not ahead of, we might fall behind and end up spending more money because we haven't been paving fast enough.
And Councilman, one of the things that we're also trying to work on, because I think one of the contributing factors to that lower mileage compared to previous years is the realities in terms of our highway user revenue allocation from the state. So that was one of our main state priorities this year. Unfortunately, we weren't successful, but we are making progress. We got the bill through the House. Just thinking creatively with our state legislation, we have some stuff cooking for Interstate 83. So it's something we are absolutely laser focused on. And we appreciate your focus on it as well.
Yeah, I think we are all happy to make sure we poke the folks at the state level to help you guys in that endeavor, because we know, of course, it just gets more expensive if we don't get ahead of it now. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're going to go back to Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, you talked about street cuts in the presentation, and there's a whole section for it. Just doing the math, this seems like a challenging metric to hit. 24,000 street cuts with only 4 inspectors, and every street cut, I mean, ideally would be inspected at least twice, once when the cut is made, once when the cut is restored to existing conditions. On top of just looking at it and doing the math and figuring this is a pretty impossible metric to hit, I think anybody that travels around the city would see that street cuts are not being restored to the standards. I don't know how many other people on this call, on this hearing, have the street cut standards, the engineering diagrams on file, but I certainly do. And I know what they're supposed to look like, and I know what they look like, and I know how often DPW fails to restore streets to existing conditions. I know how often BGE particularly fails to restore the subsurface We get a lot of street cuts that get repaired, but then it sinks shortly after because they fail to put in gravel and concrete appropriately underneath the asphalt surface. So is this really a realistic prospect with only 4 inspectors to meet this 24,000 street cuts?
No, it is not. That's why we are pushing to try to hire more. And the public works inspectors, we have not been able to get any. We might have to maybe go contractually to hire more, which will cost extremely high amounts of money. But no, we are unable to hire for this position. This public works inspector 2s are very difficult to obtain with the right skills.
Well, so if we only have 4 budgeted here, how are we going to hire them if we don't even have them budgeted? I mean, it'd be one thing if I was looking at additional vacancies that were at least funded, but these positions that I think we both know you need to hire for do not appear here to have funding.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 403, service 696. You got 3 public works inspectors, inspector 2, and 1 public works inspector 3. That's 4 for the entire city.
Got 3. Yeah, I believe, no, we don't have, there's vacancies here. Let me see. 2, 3, 4. So this unit also has another, I believe another one of the inspectors is budgeted under the street management section. So there's multiple inspectors within the maintenance division. And we're trying to hire for all of them, and they would focus on, we are looking primarily for street cut inspector places. So if we get them, we hire them. We did interviews or tried to do interviews and did not get substantial enough candidates.
So in addition to, we're looking for an outcome here, right? In addition to hiring the people to actually do the street inspections, are we missing other personnel to perform other operational duties like I said, DPW routinely leaves streets unrestored to existing conditions, unrestored to our own street standards. And I have to go to DPW, and when I do that, I copy Liam so that DOT knows that I'm saying here's something that DOT should have known did not meet DOT standards. Is there a communication breakdown is there something that should be happening where DPW is letting you know that they're in the street? Is DOT missing somebody that should be getting that kind of information from DPW? Do we need somebody else to do that? Is there a position that's unfilled or unfunded that would help with that?
There's not an unfunded position for that.
But so this is not an inspector. This is somebody else that needs to be hired.
Yeah, we don't have that. We do not currently have that position.
So just somebody to be told when street cuts are being made.
I'm confused as to what you're asking now.
I'm just trying to understand what the personnel issue here is. This seems like a pretty basic thing. There's got to be some operational, but it's either internal policy and operations or it's personnel that's somebody like DOT is not holding even our own city to its own standards when we, DPW, are making these street cuts. Where's the breakdown?
It's inspectors as well as, it's mainly the inspectors.
Steve, if I can jump in. Good afternoon or evening, everyone. We have a CPM program that I'm participating in at the University of Baltimore. My capstone project is geared towards coming up with some creative ideas to help us in this area of not having enough inspectors. Ideally, we should have 4 inspectors and 1 supervisor per sector, which would give us approximately 24 employees. So if this capstone project that I'm working on pans out, then we should be in a good position to take advantage of some of the personnel that we already have and not have to go and hire new employees or look for persons outside of the agency. So I'd be glad to share with you any details that may be encouraging for you to know that we are working on this. And I'd be glad to do that offline if you'd like to.
That sounds great. I have other questions, but I'll wait until my next time comes up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're going to move to Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to thank my colleagues for asking all of the pedestrian safety and traffic calming questions that I had as well. As you can tell, Director, that is a huge issue for all of us, and I'm glad that everybody seems to be on the same page with that. I want to thank you also for the Director and Liam and Graham and everybody who's been working on 28th and 29th Street for us. Councilman Stokes and I are working together on the traffic calming there. And of course, I'm excited about the work that's being done on 83 to slow things down. So thanks for all of your efforts there. Question about the abandoned vehicles. I understand, and I know that 2 of my colleagues are working on something similar here, so maybe they're already working on this, but I'm concerned about the fact that we have so many abandoned vehicles, and then they get auctioned off and end up on the street again and could possibly be abandoned again. Do we have any data about that? And if we're seeing that the cars are being picked up again, or if they're being used in an illegal car wash, or a car repair place or something like that, how can we find another way? I know we have to recoup our expenses, which is why we're auctioning them off, but is there a different way to handle this issue? Because it's a lot of abandoned vehicles, and of course a lot of people notice more things now that they're at home, so I think we're getting more calls, or at least I feel like it. So can you talk a little bit more about the abandoned vehicle issue and this auctioning off, and is there a way to do it differently where we don't have to auction them off and get them right back on the street?
Yes, hey, we could certainly run data to see if we have any VIN numbers that had multiple hits on them. I haven't heard that in particular. For the vehicles, we do auction them. We have to get them off the lot in a certain time frame, and we don't necessarily, I haven't heard any other ideas at this time, but I could certainly listen. A lot of the vehicles that we end up auctioning aren't the greatest. Not all of them. So once in a while there's something cherry, but a lot of times they barely move. So usually people, if they have something worthwhile, generally try to come and get their vehicle out of the impound lot. But we can certainly find out if there's any bins or repeat vehicles that we sell and come back.
Okay, I appreciate that. This is just me thinking through the process, but also noticing so many more vehicles these days. So wondering if there was this sort of repeat issue, particularly in some of our, people are buying them and going right back into our communities with illegal car sales and car repair, which I think my colleague is working on. So I guess we'll figure that out once they're done with the work group. My second question, if this is kind of obscure, the DOT locator, I guess I'll just go back to Real Property Management Service 727, talks about maintaining the real property maps, property identification database. It's my understanding that database is also used by finance to be able to send the tax notices. And as I was working through the tax sale process with several of my constituents, because anybody who I saw was on the tax sale list, I went to their door to see how I could be helpful. There were some people who never got them because the zip codes were wrong. And I noticed several zip codes that were incorrect in that list. Do you know, I guess I'm asking, how does this list work? You know, you keep up this list. Apparently there's some errors. How does it work to keep it updated? Who keeps it updated? How do we make sure that you get the correct zip codes for this particular list? Because in this case, since finance uses it for tax bills, which I thought doesn't make sense because they should be using SDAT, you know, we just found a lot of errors in this list.
Well, I mean, I'd love for you to meet up with Wes Shaw, the supervisor for the section, and show those. But generally, there's most of the changes that we process come through a form that a resident sends in that we then take and then we'll take the form and we'll input it. It has to be, you know, signed by the resident. I don't have all the other answers about the particulars of how other data might get transferred in there. So I don't know the deep IT details, but we can certainly get back to you on those.
Yeah, if somebody on this can get back to me on that, that would be great. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. We're going to circle back to the members whose hands I see are raised at this time. Councilman Conway.
No further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And also, well, we're going to go back to Councilman Dorsey. I know you had a few additional questions. And actually, sorry about that. Our chair is back and he has a few questions. So we're going to be turning the committee back over.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman Dorsey, I'm gonna get one round to two in, so I'm caught up with you, and then I'll go back to you. Thank you, sir. Director Sharkey, I'm going to rattle off a list of agencies, and I want you to tell me what these agencies have in common. You are getting this question just as all these other agencies are, so I'm not putting you on the spot. Department of Transportation, Department of Public Works, Department of Housing and Community Development, Department of General Services, Baltimore City Recreation and Parks, Housing Authority of Baltimore City, and the Baltimore City Public School System. What do all 7 of these agencies have in common? I'm pretty sure Liam knows the answer to this.
You serve the city?
They all mow grass. I find this to be ridiculous, that this can't be managed from one agency. I know that DOT has an operation, and one of the areas that I most frequently deal with you guys on is the work you do on the medians. You know, a lot of complaints about coming up 295. What are your thoughts on centralizing the grass mowing operation for the city?
I think there's certain parts of the grass mowing operations that could work together and other ones that wouldn't. Specifically, the solid waste lots are a very different animal than some of the other ones. But I guess the thing is you want to be able to hold a person accountable for their zone. So the medians are mine, the parks are Reggie's. And so you want to be able to do that. So I don't necessarily see there being a great cost value. There could be some contracts let that work together. Previously, back under Chris Thomas Cuddy and the Recs and Parks and schools combined their mowing contract and had a lot of savings. So I certainly think there could be places where more synergies could be found, but I'm not necessarily sure I'm interested or in favor of a full consolidation.
Thank you. Can we talk for a moment about the special events division, which is a division that brings in revenue to the city each year, but has also historically been grossly understaffed. I think Michelle Abbott Cole, who runs that division, does a fantastic job. She's under Tim Knight in the right-of-way division. What are your thoughts on what that division could do if it was adequately staffed?
I mean, they work hard and they've got a lot. So I think that, besides looking for, possibly the new Invista system, which will take a couple of years, which would greatly improve their work, some other pieces along with city financial systems and business process can be improved. But I just think it would, if there was more room for more people, that would lead to some improved customer service and quality, because a lot of it is a rush. So, I mean, any place where we have more employees, we can improve the quality or quantity of work done.
Councilman Dorsey, before I go to you, if you'd indulge me, you were talking about utility work coordination before and some of the frustration about that. I missed part of the hearing. Did you touch on Invista and the use of Invista at all?
I did not, but I think that Councilman Conway was generally asking as well, also about
I did.
coordination. Yeah, there was some conversation about coordination, but not in Vista, I don't think.
So
I asked, Mr. Chair, I asked,
please.
I didn't use the word Invista because I didn't know what it was, but what the word was, but it was about, my complaint was about not coordination with BGE.
Okay, yeah, same frustration, different flavor. Director, on the Invista piece, can you talk to us about what the limitations of, forget about the fact that BGE simply does not use Invista the way that they're supposed to. Can you, from DOT's operations perspective, can you talk about some of the limitations of Invista and what would make your department's life easier in terms of managing our right-of-way?
Yeah, well, definitely Invista was really cool and awesome when it came out, and it's been bought maybe once or twice since we were one of the early adopters of the system. But there's definitely better and brighter other systems out there that we'd certainly be interested in looking into and changing to. The number one issue is the ease of use of outside users. There's other systems that have better, public web portals or public web portals that can enter data. The deconfliction system in Vista could be better. That's the deconfliction, the way that the data is. The data entry for the users is a little bit outdated. So it's certainly, we're interested in finding a new system.
So before I close out and pass it off to Councilman Dorsey and City Administrator Shorter, I'm not sure if this is a question for you, because the resources required for this may be outside of DOT. What would the administration's appetite be to formally explore, not putting a document out on the street, but formally explore whether or not making a move in terms of our right-of-way management system is something that would be a good idea for the city?
I would thank you, Chairman. I would need to talk to all of the directors involved, including huddling with DOT before answering that question for the administration.
Could I ask that you connect with those directors and circle back with the council in, say, 2 months? Would that be a reasonable time frame?
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Administrator. Appreciate it. Councilman Dorsey. And Councilman Dorsey, everyone's had 2 rounds so far?
Yeah, I believe I've had 2 rounds.
Okay, Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The ATVES has an ombudsman, and I'm not really sure like how a person gets to them and what their role is. That is a filled position at present, is it not? Okay. So I had a case not long ago where a person had their car stolen. It was recovered in DC 24 hours later. And in that time, the thief had accrued a dozen tickets from city ATVES cameras. And when he ended up going to the finance department to try to get those tickets nullified. And the finance department said that he needed to go to the police department and pay to get a copy of a police report that they could then bring to the finance department, who would do them the service of sending it to the state's attorney's office in order for the state's attorney's office to review the tickets to determine whether they could be nullified on the basis of the car having been stolen at the time. And he couldn't even figure out how to get a copy of the police report. All of this just seems like a lot to do when there's an ombudsman for this specific purpose of dealing with these ATVES tickets. Is this how this should work, or is there some better role that the ombudsman can play in this? And is there some better communication that we can do to get the word out about the ombudsman?
No, I think that's a good idea. We should certainly highlight the ombudsman more on the website. The ombudsman just changed over to a new ombudsman maybe a month or 2 ago, so maybe some more tweets as well as a more prominent place on the website, and maybe just a blast explaining out to the other agencies, finance and police mainly, about the ombudsman and what they do and don't do.
It seems like that would be really great information to get to the folks at where you pay tickets at the finance department. I don't know if there's any information on it about any information on the tickets themselves about this, but hopefully there could be. But I'd really like to hear more about that. Hopefully I'd like to follow up in a conversation with that. There's just a lot that goes on with this, the police report, the state's attorney's office and all that. It just seems like kind of a lot. You kind of touched on this before, on kind of the siloing of different approaches. When you're talking about different types of traffic calming. By the way, I was really thankful to hear from Adria that that the department is really interested in looking at this traffic calming policy as something that this traffic calming request policy that as something that can generate more than just speed hump requests, that the department is not looking at the 2 things, speed hump and traffic calming, as synonymous. I think that's really great. That's really great to hear. But are we doing anything like in the past when I've said, like, well, if we put a bike lane here, that would help calm traffic by taking away some of the road space for cars. I've kind of gotten a response, well, we can't do that as a traffic calming thing because that's kind of in the bailiwick of the bike program, and the 2 near the between shall meet. Are we making progress in trying to break this down so that we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly I think that's where the traffic engineers come in, that they're involved on each project and trying to look for the best, traffic safety solution for each project, whether it be a bike lane or other things, a regular road diet. It could be, just different things depending upon the location. So, they are going to be infused or looking at lots of different projects, as well as really training the individual project managers on their areas to look for it. So it might be civil engineers in the bridge section or civil engineers in the streetscaping section to all look for these complete streets treatments. But of course, the traffic division will also, as we continue to grow the engineers, will look over those things and try to add those complete streets elements and look over and review the plans before they come in.
That's good. I'm looking forward to seeing some more different types of treatments available. I know that I've got certain roads like Glenmore and White Avenue where we just like constantly have traffic calming requests, but it's it's a collector road where the fire department doesn't want speed humps, and we're not really tooled up to employ some of the other options. So hopefully we can normalize some of these things. Mr. Chair, I have other questions, but let's.
Thank you for following the 2-question rule, Councilman Dorsey. Your cooperation is appreciated. Councilwoman McCray.
I have no further questions.
Councilman Stokes.
I don't have a question, but I just have a few comments to Mr. Director Sharkey, to your staff. Thank you. To Toby Goodwin, Trina, Crochet, Graham Young, and his staff. You do a wonderful job. Liam, we had some issues over in Olive and Broadway, and they jumped right on it. We had accidents that were happening at Biddle and Bond. We get the new signal light put up. It should be up this month in June. So I want to get kudos to your staff and to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos.
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got one last final follow-up question. So it was noted to me in a meeting with budget that we experienced some savings as a result of some of the LED updates. Those lights, of course, are much cheaper to not maintain, but to run. And as a result, we saw a reduction in the lighting budget on that line item. Is that something we expect to continue going forward? Do we expect that that reduction in expense to be sustainable going forward? And are there any other opportunities? Are we still kind of building upon that?
So I believe for these savings was actually the ending of an ESCO contract. So, I don't know the terms. I think there's 7-year terms, 10-year terms that we pay back. So basically, if you've got different loans out and then you don't have to pay a loan anymore, then you get money back, or you don't have to pay that on the anymore. So I believe that's where the real savings, that larger jump came. So that will come up at certain years, but it's not going to be an every year thing. It'll be when we did work in the past and when that loan comes up.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman Schleifer. All right, Councilman Dorsey, you had 3 rounds so far?
I believe that's, maybe I'm
All right.
losing track at this point.
That's all right. I'll take my 3rd round, then we'll jump back to you. Director, there's a project I want to reference, but I don't want to violate my own rule of not doing district-specific stuff. So I'm only using it as an example. There's a development project on the 800 block of Harlem and Edmondson in Upton. I don't expect you to know this. A bunch of vacants. We're, among other things, reconstructing the alley. And the alley's being reconstructed and widened. Your folks have been immensely helpful, as have some folks over at HCD and law, et cetera. I'm wondering, as we start to focus on equity and we think about projects like that, where economic development is direly needed, neighborhoods like Upton, are there sources of funding within the department to prioritize capital investments specifically to spur targeted economic development based on HCD's community development framework?
The planning department did put a small amount of money. I want to say 250,000, maybe 500 of capital money into the department's budget for things like that.
Appreciate it. I know we have several needs in the city and would love to see that funded at a greater level in future years.
Mr. Chair, I also know, like through our streetscaping section, there's actually, that's something where our streetscaping section, when they do projects, those can be pretty transformative when they're implemented. It just takes a while to bank that money through the capital budget process. I'll have to double check, but for Upton, I believe there's something in the CIP for Pennsylvania Avenue. And then back over on the east side, Orleans Street is in the CIP now. So those are examples, but there takes multiple years to get the funding squared away.
Director, just building off that, are there opportunities through tech division or other areas within the department to facilitate those type of improvements on the fly without getting it programmed in the capital budget?
Not really. It's not, most of the sidewalks and alleys end up being done through contracts that require repayment by the owner, not these. So of course there is not at this time.
Got it. Thank you. Other question is the Harbor Connector station at the Rusty Scupper. I know there were some structural integrity issues with that. I believe that's been shut down. Liam, is about a year now, plus or minus. I've been back and forth with Marva and some of the folks from your team. Is there someone on the call this evening that has oversight of the Circulator and Harbor Connector that can speak to what that issue is and what we'd be looking at in order to get that stop up and running again?
So it's not the Rusty Scupper stop, it's the Harbor View stop.
Harbor View stop.
Yeah, so it's currently at the Rusty Scupper. It was previously at there. I know that there's two issues. Number one is I know that the location had fallen in. This is going back a couple of years. This is years had fallen in or had some structural integrity, which was owned by the Harborview folks. I believe that was fixed, and I know they needed to get clearance. I think clearance might have come recently, but we may also need to renew. So besides the clearance from fire department / HCD, I know that we also needed to renew an agreement or right of entry agreement to use the land as well. So those are the two pieces, and I'm not sure. Is Theo on? Theo, do you remember if HCD or whoever cleared the final work?
I don't know off the top of my head, but Theo, if Theo's on here, would be the person to address it. Monica would know it well, but I know she's not on this call tonight.
Good afternoon, good evening. No, the issue has not been addressed. At this point, the fire department has told us that they needed to do a site visit in order to confirm that they could lift kind of the hole that was put in there. We have been trying to connect with them. Last week, we had a meeting planned on the site that they canceled. due to emergency. So we are in the process of trying to bring them back on the site for them to do another site inspection. That's kind of like the first step. As we met with the folks from Harborview and the folks from Water Taxi on the site, the ball was kind of on our court first, meaning city, the fire department, to release literally the option of having a stop back there. Once we got that clear, technically, yes, there was going to be the issue of going back and looking at the right of entry to use it. But the folks at Harborview seems to be cooperative and wanted to do that.
Theo, could you please keep me updated directly on the results of that meeting with fire?
Will do, Mr. Chair, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Theo. I really appreciate it. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask that, so Henry Raymond yesterday committed to getting some results on a report on damage to fixed, I guess what the law department refers to as fixed objects. This obviously includes street lights, but also street signs and jersey or guardrails and you know, anything that's in the kind of public space that gets damaged by cars. There's a huge problem in the city. I got some numbers on the street lights from Brent Hooper not too long ago, just numbers of lights that were damaged year over year, and did some math based on what I know the cost for the materials to be and some estimates on the labor for replacements. On street lights alone, we're incurring $2.25 million in damage costs annually based on, you know, the information that I have, and that's just street lights. And the law department is able to recoup less than 1% of that amount. So there's a huge, huge financial loss associated with the damage from vehicles driving into stuff. Is the department factoring this, you know, like basically making a pitch to say we need to be spending way more to prevent these kind of crashes, just from a basic financial proposition? But that's twice as much as we've ever spent on bike lanes in any year, and we're incurring that level of damage every year. Are we making that kind of pitch for more money for safety improvements?
Yep. No, I'm always pushing for money for safety improvements and trying to move capital money towards complete streets treatments. So yeah, the cars do hit into street lights and other things quite frequently. And you know, the only way to really, besides enforcement, is to also improve the safety of the roadway. So as we can expand, I would always support more money towards that in the future.
I mean, I guess my real question is, like, have we done any level of analysis to say, if we spent X amount over 3 years or something to make a certain volume of safety improvements, it would save us X amount in the damages that we could prevent through better design? Is there anything like that level of return on investment analysis that's actually happening?
I mean, our current focus is on finding the highest crash intersections and improving them. So those may or may not yield dollar benefits, but they'll yield benefits in terms of safety for the residents. So that's the focus at this time. I don't necessarily know how to do that type of analysis. The dollars are, you know, we need to just spend as much money on complete streets and safe treatments as possible.
I'd be interested if you have a fiscal analyst that I could talk with and have a follow-up conversation about this to look at what we might be able to do. And we just ask that whoever you need to work with, Director Raymond, who's taking point on pulling together a report on the total damages to fixed objects throughout the city. Thank you. I think that's basically everything that I wanted to bring up, except to say it'd be nice if we had, again, more parking enforcement folks in order to be able to do some later shift or something. I mean, they're leaving at 11 o'clock. For example, right now, I'm hearing a lot of complaints about things that happen basically after DOT's last shift ends, and there's nobody, I guess, at 311 to take those to take late night calls, and no way to get any response on that unless it goes through 911 and we get police out there. It'd be nice to be able to see some level of late night parking enforcement, even at some level. So I just hope to have that kind of kept in mind as we try to expand that, I guess, and back to previous levels. I also think it's really important to do that because if we take a bigger picture look at city finances, there's an enormous amount of police time spent at car crashes. You can sometimes see 3 patrol cars, 8 officers standing around at a single crash, and maybe one of them does a report. It'd be great to be able to shift some of that to DOT to do crash reporting or crash response to some level, so that we didn't have to rely on very, very costly police response there. I think this is a recommendation that's being made in cities across the country to shift these kind of tasks away from police. I hope that DOT can be thinking about how it can help us to decrease our reliance on the police department in the ways that the police work presently intersects with kind of DOT's realm of responsibility. That's all from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues, any other questions? Director Sharkey, thanks for being with us tonight. I want to take a moment to thank Marva Williams, the liaison to the 11th District and some others. She does a fantastic job. Tavon, Damon, Kendall, thanks for the help with the street pole and Heritage Crossing. Chief Goodwin, Chief Wilson, thanks for taking calls on the weekend from me at 1 in the morning. I appreciate you. Michael Camper, Satinder, thanks for the help with the sidewalks in Bolton Hill. Bamal, thanks for handling the stuff on McMecken Street. I will not forget that. Graham, appreciate all the traffic calming stuff in Bolton Hill. Really appreciate the way that you worked with the community on that one, and just continue to make DOT look good every single day. We're lucky to have you with the city, Graham. Theo, Valerie, appreciate you guys. David Fram, you've been an absolute rock star. I want to thank Tim Knight, especially for all your work on the outdoor seating stuff last year. The city couldn't have done what we did by trimming that process from 3 months down to 3 days without your expertise and your time. So Tim, please know that I really, really appreciate it. And finally, Steve, I maintain that the best thing that's happened to this department in 6.5 years since I've been on the council is you coming over as director and Liam coming over to head up legislative affairs. So really appreciate you guys and just keep up the great work. Thank you. We're in recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow.